So those of you I don't know, my name is Danny Stacey. I think my official title is Senior Manager Employer Insights at Indeed. I prefer the term Recruitment Evangelist, which sounds very grandiose, I know, but my role is split into half of what I'd ordinarily be doing is actually speaking on stage at events around the world on all kinds of topics, from SEO and recruitment marketing right through to things like job content optimization, a little bit less sexy, that one, employer brand, thinking about unconscious bias. If you caught me last week at RecFest, it was diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity. The other half of what I do is consulting with many of the largest enterprises across EMEA. And again, that's looking really at end-to-end strategy, from thinking top of funnel and candidate attraction right through to actually hiring, thinking about onboarding and then retention of talent as well. Whatever you've done in the background, Natasha, that has clearly works. It's now enabling me to share my
simple tick box that I hadn't selected, so nothing too complicated.
Nothing too complicated. Thank you so much. What I'm going to do then, I'm going to share some slides with you, only for about 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to break into some conversation. So bear with me while I bring this up. I promise not to kill you with PowerPoint today. Just a few slides that really I want to use just to kind of, I guess, get you thinking about what's important to you right now. What are your challenges? What tools you're investing in, for example, what's working, what's not, because that's the kind of stuff I'd love you to then discuss when we break out into our Zoom breakout rooms or break out to tables if we're in a more in-person world. So the topic for the discussion today: recruiting and hiring in the new world of work. As I said, about 20 minutes of content, and then we'll break out to discussion. If you've got questions as I'm presenting, I'm more than happy for you to put those in the chat box. I might not spot them as I'm speaking, so I will lean on some of my colleagues, my Indeedians, to support in answering some of those questions. Really, I want the session today not to be me to present and then answer a Q&A, me to present and then you all to have that discussion. You will be more than welcome to find me on LinkedIn after the event today to ask any direct questions of me or to find out more about Indeed specifically. I'm not going to talk very much about Indeed at all today, actually. So let's jump straight in then to the content. Now, as you know, 2020 has been a very turbulent year for everyone. The effects of COVID-19 really hit employers hard in particular. And from kind of rethinking recruiting and hiring strategies to keeping your existing workforce safe, engaged and productive, talent leaders had to make some pretty big changes and make them pretty quickly. I've never seen such big projects signed off so quickly as we saw in kind of March, April, May of this year. And with change comes opportunity. Although we're still in uncharted territory, many businesses have used the crisis as a real inflection point. So for some of you, that might be, the recruitment and hiring challenges that you were trying to solve pre-pandemic. They've become irrelevant overnight, maybe. Or for others of you, that real onslaught of the virus has forced bold decisions and unforeseen solutions. Some of you might have seen great successes with those. Others, maybe you need to have a little bit of refinement. You've put something in place very quickly, and now you need to actually make that better now that it's up and operating. And as we're navigating a very uncertain future, employers are continuing to adapt how they attract talent while embracing new and innovative ways of hiring. I'm going to build this slide out, but effectively with opportunity, you're going to have realization, lots of innovation happening, which is fantastic. Efficiency, you're going to need that, possibly with more job seekers and less recruiters if you've had to furlough. Improvements, of course, being continually made, trying to modernize and come into this virtual world, whatever that means. We'll touch on that. Should be seeing lots of progress and hopefully fulfillment. So today I'm going to talk about a few ways that employers have adjusted their recruiting and hiring strategies to meet today's new challenges. But more importantly, how are we going to improve upon them as we look to the future? So first, we'll look at virtual hiring specifically. So kind of what's working, what's not, some simple best practices that you can use to ensure success. Then we'll discuss how you can target desirable candidate pools by reviving your job content and candidate experience. That old one, it's still very important. And finally, we're going to share what to do next with that employer brand. Great to have Helen on the call today. Whether your hiring is accelerated or if it's slowed. Now, many companies have gone virtual since the onset of COVID-19. As I said before, what does that really mean? Well, How do you identify, assess, screen, sell, hire, onboard new team members virtually if you're ensuring a positive candidate experience in this virtual world? First, we just want to define a couple of things here. We've got kind of virtual recruiting and virtual hiring, which are slightly different. Virtual recruiting is more like pre-screening and initially engaging with candidates remotely. So that might be virtual open houses, virtual job fairs, a little bit less of that that scaled stuff going on in the UK right now compared to some of the markets I've supported. But virtual hiring, yeah, of course, that's assessing, interviewing, hiring, onboarding candidates remotely. That's things like virtual job tryouts, video interview panels, big virtual hiring events that you might have attempted to run. And I want to share also this quote from Scott Bono. He's our VP of Talent Attraction at Indeed. And I think this really resonates with me. Virtual recruiting and hiring are great equalizers. You can't walk a candidate through your awesome offices or entice them with free lunches. So the conversation really shifts to what matters most, and that's the needs that you've got, the skills that your candidate has, and then that kind of interpersonal dynamic between you. And this is an interesting stat. Virtual hiring is not a new concept. Many enterprises have been experimenting with or have already fully integrated process like virtual interviews long before COVID-19. Certainly top of funnel for me interviewing for anyone coming onto my team prior to March this year. A lot of it is done virtually until I invite someone to come in and present in person to me. The pandemic has forced businesses to scale those practices and quickly. So as I've shown on the screen, 86% of organizations are already conducting virtual interviews to hire during the pandemic. And in a recent study, employers reported that going virtual has been pretty easy to scale overall. You might be sitting there thinking that's not the case for us. We'll discuss that. Improve the ease of scheduling interviews between obviously the job seeker and the recruiter, and then reduced incidences of ghosting. There's a term that we're using more and more in the UK. Not a pleasant one. However, others have reported that internet availability, connectivity, and kind of internet speed among candidates have been challenges. And in addition, some candidates' reluctance to appear on camera as well. I think some people still find it weird being on camera at home. And then finally, some employers noted there were portions of the interview process that simply has to be done in person. You might feel the same as that as well. I'll often challenge it. I think there's only a few things that maybe have to be done in person, but that's again part of the table discussion. And as we embrace virtual hiring for the long haul, there's an investment in putting good processes in place. That's going to save you time. It's going to save you headaches. It's going to save you poor experiences down the road. So I want us to now look at a few of these best practices. Be thinking about where this ties into what you do and where you're doing things differently. Investing in user-friendly and proven tools and resources. So from pre-screening to interviewing to onboarding, do your research and ensure the tools that you currently utilize meet all of your needs. Is there a capacity limit for video conferencing? Can new hire communications and paperwork be automated in some way? Are electronic signatures allowable? If your current tools don't meet your needs, you need to choose one that does. So again, speak to your peers. What are they using? No matter what the transaction, though, send detailed instructions to candidates. Always do that, even prior to COVID, do that. So for example, video interviewing, including recommended internet speed and operating system compatibility. You wouldn't forget to give a candidate your office address or directions to your reception desk, would you? So don't assume that all people are familiar with your chosen virtual platform or technology. Do train all your users on the new tools so they feel confident and can focus on the candidates. So, recruiters, interviewers, even HR support staff, any technology user from your company should feel really confident and at home with their interactions with candidates in this technology. Well-trained staff is going to result in less confusion or miscommunication with candidates and new hires. And then determine in advance whether and what alternative accommodations you're actually able to provide. So for example, maybe a phone interview actually would suffice for candidates who don't have reliable internet access, or perhaps in-person interviews are feasible with appropriate safety and social distancing precautions. Some companies have been offering, and this is true by the way, have been offering drive-through options to complete new hire paperwork and supply pickup. I wonder if any of you have tried that. We really are in extraordinary times. As I keep saying when I present, please do let creativity prevail. Now, speaking of alternative arrangements, if neither visual nor face-to-face interviews are options at this time, due to the level of position you're hiring or otherwise, consider other ways to keep your business moving forward until you can safely do so in person. So, for example, a contractual arrangement might provide that flexibility that you need, something we've certainly done at Indeed. So being sure to execute contract employees with the understanding that the in-person interview process is going to resume once both parties are able to safely. And then you can revisit that contract more than usual. You know, as the rules of the game are playing, as the state of play, the UK economy is changing. Go back and revisit those contracts, make sure they're fit for purpose, because that's going to ensure that your needs and goals are being met. And then one last note about candidate experience. It's easy to get wrapped up in all the exciting features that new technology can provide. I've been trying out all sorts of whiteboarding in Zoom. That's not a favorite of mine. I prefer to use the board behind me, actually. The thing is, though, those resources are meaningless in the absence of basic etiquette. So clear and personal communication with every candidate is vital. Just as you've likely increased your employee communications during the pandemic, the same should happen at that candidate level as well. Keep candidates up to date on your current hiring needs. You know, are you hiring immediately? Is this for a later date? Were you blindsided by a sudden freeze or furlough situation? Again, don't be guilty of that ghosting of candidates. Be open and honest at all times. And outline your virtual hiring process from the beginning. So, you know, how many video interviews are there going to be? What other screenings are in place? Are you ever actually going to meet the candidate prior to extending an offer? You know, you're going to meet them in person. If you're not, make it really clear that's the case. I want to take a look now at a company who are doing a great job with that candidate piece and setting themselves up for success. And that's Vodafone. I'm sure most of you, if you are based in the UK, will be aware of Vodafone, the world's leading mobile communications provider. I've got some notes here. They operate in 26 countries, partnership with networks over 55 more, over 444 million customers, and 19.5 million of those are in the UK. So Vodafone has had to take extra steps really to assure people in secure jobs elsewhere that despite the uncertain times, it's still safe to take that leap and switch jobs over to Vodafone. So just briefly on the screen here, you know, dedicated online resources providing virtual hiring tips, as well as, you know, having those virtual interview guides that they've created, something similar that we've done at Indeed as well. You know, don't assume that everyone's going to be able to be successful as a candidate on a virtual interview. Vodafone have found video interviewing to be the best alternative to face-to-face, as many of us have, but they will facilitate an engaging phone interview if preferred. They give the candidate the option, actually. Working equipment such as laptops and phones, they get sent out actually a week before that person even begins. Obviously, that'll be dependent on the role, I imagine. And then webinar sessions provided by the onboarding team for all new starters prior to the first day and ongoing. Now that's interesting because I know the likes of IBM do something similar. They start the onboarding actually quite a bit before someone starts on their first day. So think about what your processes are in place. If you do something like that, I promise you it will improve retention over that first 3 to 6 months. People are just more engaged, even if you're giving them just some reading to do prior to joining up. Now, the pandemic has changed not only our economic landscape, but also the way we work. So it's making those seemingly mundane parts of the recruiting process even more important to go and revisit. Where's he going with mundane? Yeah, it's going to be that content piece. So with so many workforce changes afoot and health and safety considerations top of mind, job seekers want to know, what can they expect, not only from the application process, but also their day-to-day work environment if they were to join you. So does your job content reflect your current reality? Are you still using copy and paste from prior to March? Maybe employees are required to work from home or the immediate future. Perhaps in-office work is essential to the business. Include those expectations. And if the position requires in-person responsibilities, be sure to highlight the safety measures that your organization is taking to protect its employees during this time, as well as any hazard pay that you might offer or additional benefits. Really important to call that out. From the surveys that we run with talent, the thing that's top of mind for so many people is just the safety for them, the safety for their families if they're going to be going to an in-person environment. Here at Indeed, we've also updated the kind of that post a job function to let employers specify the types of remote work options. So simple way for job seekers to find the right fit for them. So you can say, is a job fully remote? Is it remote in the short term? But job seekers can also search by that as well. As another reason to ensure your job descriptions are transparent and well crafted, the pandemic has led to a high unemployment rate. Gone are the days of me presenting that slide that says unemployment's the lowest it's been in 45 years. Nope, it's changed. And that typically results in more job seekers applying for a limited number of positions. In a recent study that we conducted, we found that some employers reported double or triple the number of applicants they normally receive for any given position. And that's different in region as well. And you can speak to our economist or see some of the content that we post around which regions we're seeing more job seekers per job, and also which functions we're finding that as well. And with many organizations furloughing staff, including recruiters, as I said before, means you've got fewer hands to help filter those qualified candidates from that abundance of applications that you're now receiving. So what can you do? Well, first, ensure your job description attracts your target candidate. A generic job description with a long bulleted list of qualifications does little to attract top talent, let alone filter out the unqualified ones. So focus on the primary qualifications and responsibilities of the role, what success actually looks like. Connect the position to your mission and values, touching on that employer brand piece. Give prospective candidates a realistic preview of what it's actually going to be like to work for you. Second, consider the addition of screening questions to narrow out your applicant pool. Big fan of screening questions. From minimal years of experience to specific educational or licensing requirements, just a few good screening questions actually go a long way in maximizing your recruiters and actually your applicants' time as well. Third up, because of its make or break nature, including the salary and benefit information can actually set expectations up front and help narrow your applicant pool. And then finally, leveraging automation where possible, of course, from filtering, screening, AI functions in your ATS to kind of third-party tools that help you schedule and follow up with candidates. And investment in automation can really pick up that slack when you're inundated with candidates or you're trying to cope with an increased workload due to the furloughs that you might have had. Watch this space. In the future, we'll actually look for as many interviews as possible to be conducted within the Indeed platform. Not only will you find talent on Indeed, you'll interview them on Indeed as well. I'm not going to say too much about that. Now, even the most expensive and robust technology cannot guarantee a strong candidate experience. Strong candidate experiences actually begin and end with good communication. So that means that as the effects of COVID-19 continue to force businesses to kind of pivot, talent leaders must take steps to ensure that changes in hiring practices and policies are properly communicated both internally and externally. So take a look at your careers site, your company page, your job descriptions, the social channels you're managing, other externally facing platforms. Is the messaging in line with your current hiring strategies, or is it actually quite outdated now? That leans into how strong your relationship might be with marketing, for example. Not a better time to go and have a virtual coffee with them. If you're lucky enough to have a marketing department, some of you might not. You might do it all yourself, but consider hosting virtual lunch and learns, or a monthly all hands meeting for your recruiters where you can share kind of any new or recent developments. While you don't want to inundate your staff with memos and meetings, that's not the goal here. You do want to provide clear direction and the opportunity to ask questions. That's really important. It's got to be two-way. And finally, the feedback that your recruiters provide about their day-to-day challenges, that's a real opportunity. And it's kind of invaluable, because if you can conduct regular surveys and take that input into consideration, you're going to be able to make much better strategic decisions. Speak to the guys on the ground, I urge you to. And then that final piece I mentioned earlier is going to be employer brand. Very rare you'll have me present and I don't at least mention employer brand. Due to my background, I guess that is. Now, it might not seem like it's a top priority right now, especially if your organization has slowed down its hiring. The truth is, though, it's actually more important now than ever. What candidates see today could impact how they think and feel about you in the future, maybe when you do start to dial up your hiring. And I want to start this piece with a quote from Brian Cheney. He's a great guy, director of our employer brand for Indeed, Helen's boss, actually. Your employer brand is even more important because your character is revealed in challenging times. Job seekers want to know how you're taking care of your employees and empowering them to be successful, especially now. Once we're through this, they're going to want to hear the story of how you responded. I think the question we're hearing from candidates now at interview more than ever is, okay, well, how did you take care of your talent during COVID-19? How are you making things safe? How have you looked after them? And in turn, you need to make sure that people doing that screening have the ammunition to answer those questions. So whether you're hiring now or still in a pause, your response during this time really matters, and it's going to continue to. It's going to influence how current and future employees feel about you after the crisis is over, assuming the crisis will be over eventually. Not being thoughtful about how you take care of your workforce and your customers is going to create a negative sentiment towards your company, making talent attraction more difficult. I do urge you to do sentiment analysis, do be doing listening, not just to current employees, but those you're trying to hire as well. And on the other hand, showcasing how your brand has responded to the crisis by taking care of your employees, the customers, and helping in the fight against the virus, that's all going to help you attract and retain top talent. And when it comes to ramping up hiring again, you're then going to be positioned for success. So still important to make your employer brand a top priority during the crisis. And your response should start and end with sensitive, authentic communication. Now, you need to acknowledge the current work environment and challenges. How is your organization responding to them? And in turn, that's going to help promote positive reactions to your brand. I noted earlier, it's important, keep your social media channels, your website, your Indeed company page, all up to date, demonstrating your response in real time. If that's a challenge for you and you end up on a table with Helen today, you can maybe ask her a few questions about that or share your own good practice, please. Be sure to communicate with honesty, sincerity, and empathy, and then continue to tell your story and ask your employees to share theirs. Great way to get your messaging out there is via your employees, and typically it's free, right? So what do those tips look like in practice? I'm going to use Marriott CEO Arne Sorensen as an example here. He manages to directly and clearly communicate with his team in the midst of a crisis in a way that many leaders in business and elsewhere kind of fail to grasp. That should be at the top of your list of priorities when figuring out how your business contingency plan looks during a crisis. I mean, the lesson here is kind of just talk to your team. They need to hear from you. They need you to be honest, be clear, and be transparent. I think Brian Chesky at Airbnb is another great example of an honest communication to employees, particularly with all the redundancies that they had to have. Helping Hands, one of my clients, a great example of an organization communicating with honesty, sincerity, and empathy. Helping Hands updated their Indeed company page with a kind of a jobs during COVID-19 section, empathizing that they have opportunities available for those who are keen to help in their local communities by helping out the elderly or those that are vulnerable. Co-op, again, another one of my clients I'm giving a shout out to here. They updated their Indeed company page, highlighting their continued support for communities during COVID-19. That's included pledging £950,000 to support fair trade producers severely affected by coronavirus and distributing food to the homeless. And then the first thing listed on McDonald's Indeed company page is their dedication statement to workplace safety. So as a company that's been able to obviously stay open throughout most of the pandemic with that drive-through service, goodness me, the queues in Hemel Hempstead for the McDonald's drive-through when that reopened, they've really been able to provide that workplace safety and then talk about that as well to those people they've not only hired but are looking to hire also. And then grocery brand Aldi, they've updated their Indeed company page really often, lots of updates coming out via the page. And in this instance, they're highlighting that importance of safety for employees. If you're sitting there thinking, oh, goodness me, he's trying to sell us Indeed company pages, they're free. Very different to a platform like a LinkedIn or something like that. On Indeed, your page is free. Go and update it. There are, of course, paid for options that I'm not going to try and sell you. I sit in marketing. If you spend or don't spend, that's up to you. But at the very least, build out the page with all the options that you have. I'm a big fan of making use of the free stuff. And then during this difficult time, take extra care of your employees. That helps them, and as a byproduct, actually strengthens your employer brand. What do I mean by taking care of employees? What does it actually look like? Well, at a minimum, it includes safeguarding their physical safety. Many organizations are recognizing that the other kind of residual impacts of this crisis on their employees, from high levels of stress, social isolation, work-life balance struggles due to the shuttering of schools and daycares, employers can make a real difference. The way they do that is things like finding ways to help employees manage stress, whether through expanded EAP programs or other physical and mental health benefits, fostering belonging, appreciation, inclusion, acknowledging really what a challenging time we're in right now, finding safe and productive ways to bring staff together, even if it's still socially distanced or virtual. And when possible, offer extra benefits to employees and your customers that exceed expectations. HP, huge tech company, they've kept their virtual workforce engaged by conducting virtual town hall meetings, Q&As with doctors, I think that's smart, and weekly homeschooling seminars for parents. Tracy Keough, HP's CHRO, she's highlighted the importance of continuously adapting their virtual communication strategy in order to maintain strong employee engagement as they settle in for the long haul of remote work. I sympathize, I empathize. We've been told we're not mandated back to the office until July 2021, indeed. Hopefully I'll get back sooner, but I'm not required in before that date. Getting used to my work from home space, goodness me. Starbucks, great example of a company going beyond what's expected. The company recognizes that employees' mental health is an important, or just as important as their physical health, especially during stressful times like these. They've actually recently begun providing all of their US employees a selection of 23 in-person or virtual psychotherapy sessions. There you go. Unusual move in any industry, let alone food retail, right? The future remains certainly uncertain, that's for sure. And as talent professionals, we share this unique opportunity to influence and help reimagine what our workplaces can actually be. What can we grow together? The only slide that I'm talking specifically about, indeed, I promise, then we'll get into those conversations. We do have a lot of resources that can guide you during this time. More tips, best practices can be found on our virtual hiring and other topics at /Lead with Indeed that you can see there. We'll make sure you get these links maybe into the chat before the session ends. Lead with Indeed, effectively, that's our new online resource for employers, featuring insights, conversation, and advice that you need to hire in today's new world of work, an ever-changing world of work. And Indeed Hire is the only time I'll mention a paid-for product, and that's our end-to-end recruiting service, helping employers effectively hire during this crisis. As a quick example, a national grocery chain, I won't say who, big chain, they were able to assess over 400 candidates and interview 90 of them in just 16 days using Indeed Hire. Worth checking those guys out. If you've got questions on them, reach out to your national account manager, or you can ping me and I'll put you in touch. I don't have the commercial discussions myself. And then COVID-19 employer resources, you can find those indeed.co.uk/hire/resources. Again, we'll get those into the follow-up that will come out to you, and I'll pop them into the chat box as well. At that point, thank you so much for listening to that presentation. I told you it would be relatively quick.